A quiet home in Florida. A mother asleep in her bed, a son lurking in the shadows, and an axe that would soon become a murder weapon. At first glance, Denise Hallowell was the kind of woman you'd admire. A teacher, a caretaker, a mother who built a life around giving second chances. But behind the doors of her lakefront home, tensions were rising. Her son, Carlos, was angry, unpredictable. And on a quiet afternoon in July 2019, everything unraveled in the most unimaginable way. But this is no simple case of family turmoil, because what followed wasn't just murder, it was calculated, cold, a crime designed to deceive. Investigators would find missing cameras, a staged crime scene, and a chilling psychological profile that changed everything. What drives someone to turn on the person who gave them everything? Was Carlos a born killer? Or was he a broken soul, shaped by trauma? One thing is certain, Denise never saw it coming. The clock is ticking. Just 22 minutes to uncover the truth behind today's mystery. This is 22 Crime.
Audio Jungle.
Viewer discretion is advised. 22 is a true crime podcast that delves into real-life crime stories, which often involve graphic descriptions, sensitive content, and strong language that may not be suitable for all audiences. We strive to present these cases with the utmost respect for the victims and their families. Please note that the content discussed may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Additionally, all resources and information presented in this podcast are obtained from publicly available internet sources. Listener discretion is strongly advised, and we recommend that only mature audiences proceed with caution. If you are sensitive to such content, please consider watching another video. Stay safe and take care of your mental health. Denise Hallowell's life was anything but ordinary. Born in 1962, she never knew the faces of the parents who brought her into this world. Instead, she was adopted and raised in Florida, carving her own path in a life that, on the surface, seemed full of purpose. She was a woman of compassion, a nurturer by nature. First, she poured her energy into caring for animals as a veterinary technician before turning her attention to shaping young minds as a schoolteacher. From the outside looking in, Denise appeared to be a woman who had it all: a career built on kindness, a deep love for those in need, and an undeniable thirst for life. But beneath that carefully constructed image, there were fractures, cracks in the foundation of her world that would eventually give way to something far darker. Denise's personal life was anything but stable. She had been married twice and divorced twice. She wasn't afraid of taking risks, not even in love. And perhaps nothing reflected that better than the way she said "I do" for the second time, mid-air, thousands of feet above the ground. Yes, Denise Hallowell got married while skydiving. It was a thrilling, reckless plunge into the unknown, one that, in hindsight, served as the perfect metaphor for her relationships. A rush of adrenaline, followed by a freefall she couldn't control. Love had come and gone. But there was one thing Denise never let go of: her dream of being a mother. She wanted something deeper, something more lasting than careers and fleeting romances. She longed for a family, a legacy. And so, she made a decision. One that she believed would give children a second chance at life. But what she never could have imagined was that one of them would take hers away. Denise's first adoption was a little boy named Carlos, a bright-eyed 4-year-old from Guatemala. She poured her heart into raising him, giving him love, structure, and a stable home. At first, it seemed like the perfect match. Carlos thrived in school. He was polite, well-behaved, everything a mother could hope for. But Denise wanted more. She wasn't done. She adopted again. This time, a 2-year-old boy from Honduras named Angel. A new little brother for Carlos. A bigger family. A fresh start. Together, they moved into a lake house in Inverness, Florida. A picturesque retreat. Surrounded by trees and calm, glistening water, It was the kind of home where, from the outside, life seemed peaceful, a sanctuary. But as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. Because beneath that serene surface, trouble was already brewing. By 2015, the cracks in the Hallowell household were no longer just subtle fractures. They were deep, jagged fault lines, threatening to split the family apart. What once seemed like a picture-perfect home was now under a microscope. The breaking point came late one night when 12-year-old Angel vanished. Denise, frantic, dialed 911. Her voice trembled as she reported her son missing, the fear evident in every word. Hours passed, the tension thick in the air, until Angel returned. But his disappearance had already set something into motion, a chain reaction that couldn't be undone. Law enforcement arrived at the Hallowell home, not just to confirm Angel's safety, but to look deeper, beyond the surface. And what they found raised more questions than answers. Angel's bedroom was stark, eerily devoid of warmth, a metal-framed air mattress, a plastic bucket. The door had been altered, bolted shut from the outside. The windows? Nailed closed. To investigators, these weren't just peculiar details. They were red flags. Angel, speaking with child welfare. Authorities painted a picture of a tense, restrictive household. He described punishments that went beyond discipline. Locked doors, isolation, control. And then there were the bruises, small but noticeable. Scratches that told a story all their own. Denise was taken into custody. The accusations against her weren't just damaging. They were life-altering. The once respected schoolteacher, the woman who had dedicated her life to helping others, was now under investigation for child abuse. The fallout was immediate. She was forced to resign from her job, losing not just her career but her sense of identity. But Denise had her own story to tell. She didn't deny the measures she had taken, but she insisted they weren't about cruelty. They were about survival. She told authorities that Angel had violent outbursts, that he had harmed the family pets, that he was a danger to himself, to her, and even to Carlos. Locking him in his room wasn't punishment. It was protection. And Carlos? He stood by her. Now, a teenager, he spoke in defense of his mother, telling investigators that Angel was dangerous, unpredictable. Their home, he said, wasn't a place of mistreatment. It was a battlefield. Even after Angel was placed in foster care, his struggles didn't end. Reports surfaced of violent outbursts, aggressive behavior, more attempts to run away. His actions fueled the question lingering in the air. Was Denise truly a mother at her breaking point, trying to manage an impossible situation? Or was there something far more disturbing at play? Eventually, the case against Denise collapsed. The charges were dropped. She walked free. But freedom didn't mean restoration. Angel never returned to the Hallowell home. Denise never spoke of him again. To those around her, it was as if he had simply ceased to exist. But even with Angel gone, the storm within the Hallowell household had not passed. It was only just beginning. Despite Denise's desperate attempts to restore order, her home was anything but peaceful. The walls that once echoed with laughter and the warmth of a family were now filled with tension, arguments, and an undercurrent of something far more dangerous. Carlos, once a bright, promising student, was slipping away. By the time he turned 13, the shift in his behavior was undeniable. He wasn't just testing boundaries, he was obliterating them. What started as quiet experimentation soon escalated into something far more alarming. He wasn't just using substances, he was dealing, he was spiraling, and the further he fell, the darker things became. His reckless choices left a trail of destruction. One night he crashed his pickup truck into a tree, an impact that should have been a wake-up call, a brush with death that might have shocked him back to reality. But instead, it only propelled him deeper into chaos. The once quiet neighborhood felt the shift too. Late into the night, unfamiliar faces came and went from the Hallowell home, shadows slipping through the darkness, drawn to something beyond friendship. The air felt different, tense, Neighbors whispered about what was happening behind closed doors. Arguments between Denise and Carlos became routine, their voices sharp, their words weapons. And then there were the unsettling occurrences. 1. Woman claimed her cat had been killed. No explanation, no suspect, just an eerie absence where the animal used to be. Another neighbor swore her goat had vanished under mysterious circumstances. No one could prove Carlos had anything to do with it. But suspicion lingered in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and inescapable. Denise was no longer just a struggling mother. She was a woman living in fear. Determined to regain some sense of control, she installed an exterior security camera, watching from the outside in. Inside, she placed 3 portable cameras, ensuring that, at any given moment, she could see exactly what was happening within her own walls. But no amount of surveillance could stop what was coming. In January of 2019, Carlos was expelled from school. Denise didn't even find out until months later. The realization hit her like a gut punch, proof that she was losing her grip, that her son was slipping through her fingers like sand. Then came July 12th, 2019. The day before everything changed, Denise had reached her breaking point. In a text to a friend, her words carried the weight of exhaustion, of frustration, of finality. If Carlos didn't change, she was done. No more second chances. No more empty threats. It was time for a choice. Either he turned his life around, or he was leaving. And that night she made her decision. She told Carlos to go. But as the hours passed, something shifted. Because in the end, despite everything, Denise did what she had always done. She let him stay. July 13th, 2019. A day that should have been nothing more than routine. A day of quiet grief, of reflection. But by nightfall, it would be remembered for something far darker. Denise and her son, Carlos, had spent the afternoon at a funeral, mourning the loss of a family friend. The mood was somber, but there was nothing unusual, nothing to hint at the horror that was about to unfold. On their way home, they made a simple stop, picking up a pie, a small comfort on an otherwise heavy day. They pulled into the driveway, around 3 p.m. Denise, drained from the long afternoon, decided to rest. She retreated to her bedroom, unaware that this nap would be her last. For a few hours, the house was quiet. Then, at some point between 3 and 6 p.m., Carlos made a decision, one that could never be undone. He stepped outside, his feet crunching against the gravel as he made his way toward the shed. His hands reached for an axe, the same one they had used for yard work, the same one that had always been a simple tool. Until now. Because when Carlos walked back into the house, axe in hand, it was no longer just a tool, it was a weapon. His grip tightened around the handle, his breathing slowed. He moved down the hallway toward his mother's room. Inside, Denise lay sleeping, unaware, defenseless. And then, without hesitation, he raised the axe and swung. The blows were swift, merciless. By the time it was over, the woman who had given him everything, a home, a future, a second chance at life, was gone. But Carlos wasn't finished. He knew the danger wasn't over, not yet. He had to cover his tracks. Moving quickly, he gathered Denise's phone and the 3 portable cameras she had placed around the house, the silent witnesses to his crime. He slipped outside, making his way toward the nearby lake. One by one, he tossed them into the dark water, watching as they vanished beneath the surface. Evidence erased. Or so he thought. At 6:18 p.m., Carlos picked up the phone and dialed 911. His voice was frantic, desperate. He told the dispatcher he had just discovered his mother's body, that someone had broken in, that an intruder had done this, some unknown shadow that had come and gone without a trace. But the thing about lies is that they unravel, and as investigators would soon discover, the truth was far more chilling than any fiction Carlos could create. As investigators stepped into Denise Hallowell's home, the silence was unnerving. The house felt hollow, stripped of life, except for the grim scene waiting inside. In the bedroom, Denise lay lifeless, her body still, her final moments stolen in an instant. The brutality of the attack was undeniable, the blows deliberate, merciless. There were no signs of struggle, no frantic calls for help. Just a quiet house and a son who claimed he had woken up to a nightmare. 17-year-old Carlos Hallowell stood at the center of it all, the one who called 911, the one who led officers to his mother's body, and, from the very beginning, the one whose story didn't quite add up. Carlos told detectives that after he and his mother returned home, Denise had gone to take a nap while he stayed in his room. Hours later, he said, the dog started barking, loud, frantic. He got up to get his mother's help, only to find her already gone, brutally attacked in her own bed. A home invasion, he suggested. Someone must have broken in while they were sleeping. But investigators weren't convinced. No forced entry, no shattered windows, no broken doors. And nothing, not a single item, was missing from the house. If this was a robbery, why had the intruder stolen nothing but Denise's life? And then, the next discovery turned suspicion into certainty. Denise had been watching. Her home was under constant surveillance. An external security camera monitored the property, while 3 portable cameras recorded inside the house. Denise had been tracking movements, keeping a watchful eye on everything. But now, those cameras were gone, vanished. As investigators searched the home, they noticed something subtle, but damning. Faint dust outlines, the unmistakable imprint of recently removed objects. The cameras hadn't just disappeared, someone had taken them, and that someone wasn't a faceless intruder. Then came another chilling revelation. Denise's cell phone was missing. Carlos had handed over his phone voluntarily. But his mother's? Nowhere to be found. Investigators turned to technology. They retrieved GPS data from Carlos's phone. And what they uncovered destroyed his alibi. At 6:18 p.m., the exact moment he called 911, Carlos's phone wasn't inside the house, it was outside, moving toward the lake. Detectives had a theory. Carlos had walked to the lake to get rid of evidence before alerting authorities, and when law enforcement organized a search of the water, they found it. 3 portable cameras, Denise Hallowell's, missing phone all deliberately discarded, all submerged beneath the surface. Carlos had tried to erase the truth, but technology kept a timestamp on every action. When they examined the devices, they found them wiped clean. No recordings, no footage left behind. But even without the footage, the timeline was damning. Denise's phone hit the water at the same moment Carlos dialed for help. The pieces were falling into place, and Carlos was running out of ways to explain himself. When confronted with the evidence, his demeanor shifted. The mask cracked. He admitted to throwing the cameras and phone into the lake, but when asked why, his answer was chilling. I don't remember. He claimed he could recall grabbing the axe, but after that, nothing. But detectives weren't buying it, because prosecutors would later reveal that Carlos had sharpened the axe in his room before the murder. This wasn't rage. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated, cold, calculated, and, now, Carlos was facing the consequences. The evidence was in place. The story was unraveling, and soon, the courtroom would hear the truth about what really happened inside Denise Hallowell's home. Carlos Hallowell sat in the defendant's chair, his expression unreadable, his future no longer in his own hands. The young man who once played the role of a helpless son, waking up to a supposed nightmare, was now facing the harsh reality of justice, and the prosecution was ready to tear his lies apart. From the very start, the state made their case clear. This was not an act of blind rage. This was premeditated. Carlos hadn't simply snapped. He had sharpened the axe before using it. He had taken the time to erase the evidence, discarding cameras and his mother's phone before calling 911. He had woven a story of an intruder, but the facts painted a darker, colder truth. This was a son who had resented his mother, who saw her rules as oppression, who decided the only way to free himself was to kill her. The prosecution didn't mince words. Carlos was not a victim of circumstance. He was a murderer, one who had plotted, prepared, and executed. But the defense fought back. They argued that Carlos was not a calculating killer, but a damaged young man, one whose life had been shaped by trauma, neglect, and emotional turmoil. They claimed he had acted in a state of uncontrolled emotion, not with malice, but with desperation. They wanted the jury to see the boy, not just the crime, but the judge made one thing clear. The trial was not about Carlos's past. There would be no discussions of previous abuse, no psychological evaluations, no debates about trauma. The jury would consider only what happened on July 13, 2019. Nothing more. Nothing less. And in the end, the evidence spoke louder than any plea for mercy. The jury deliberated for less than 90 minutes. The verdict? Guilty Carlos Hallowell was convicted of first-degree murder. His sentence? Life in prison. No possibility of parole. No second chances. For Carlos, the sentence was permanent, but due to his age at the time of the crime, the law required his case to be reviewed in 2044, a small glimmer of hope, buried beneath decades of time. But for now, justice had been served. That's the case of Denise Hallowell, a mother who dedicated her life to giving second chances, only to have her own taken away in the most brutal way imaginable. But was this a case of cold-blooded murder, or the tragic breaking point of a troubled mind? The verdict is in, but the questions remain. What do you think? Let us know in the comments and join the conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the join button on YouTube if you'd like to support us. Every click helps us bring you more deep dives into the most twisted cases. Want more? You can find all the show notes plus extra materials that didn't make it into the script on our website. Head over to 22crime.com for exclusive content. And in the end, no matter how much we think we know someone, we never truly know what they're capable of until it's too late. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, sometimes, the most dangerous monsters don't come from the darkness. They're the ones we call family.